just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. Well, it's a long, long journey to the capital city. It's a long, long wait while I'm sitting in committee. But I know...
Boy, Bill and I have had a lot of years together over at the Capitol, and this year was no exception. It's been one of the wilder, crazier years in the legislature, but nonetheless a fulfilling one if you like that sort of thing. Wednesday of this week was crossover day. What, Bill? Oh, you're probably right. Bill told me that I should explain to you what crossover day is. What crossover day is when all bills have to pass their house of origin in the legislature. In other words, it's the 50th day of the legislature, and all the House bills have to pass the House and be reported to the Senate, and all the Senate bills have to report to the Senate and be reported to the House, so that for the last 10 days of the legislative session, the House works on Senate bills and the Senate works on House bills. That's crossover day. And we thought while we took time to catch up and see what bills are still alive and what bills aren't going to make it and so forth, that it might be time to take a minute and explain the legislative process to you. I'm reminded of a quote by Otto von Bismarck, the first chancellor of Germany, who said, "To retain respect for sausages and laws, one must not watch them in the making." In other words, it's best that we don't know how our laws and sausages are made. I'm Ray Joseph, CEO of the West Virginia Association of Realtors, and this is your latest legislative update. You know, legislators get a bad rap a lot in the news and when we complain about things and hear about them, but if you think about it, we're really working right on schedule of the way things are supposed to be. In the legislature, according to the Constitution, the legislative session convenes the second Wednesday of each January. On that Wednesday, the legislature begins a 60-day session. That 60-day session starts the second Wednesday in January and goes 60 days thereafter, except, again, according to the Constitution, every 4 years when we get a new governor. When we get a new governor, they start the second Wednesday in January, and on that day, they recess for 30 days to allow the governor to prepare a budget. So in essence, in those every 4 years, we actually have a 90-day process versus a 60-day process. This year, we are in that 60-day process. So at the end of that 30-day extension, we've been 30 days in, the governor prepares a State of the State address. He addresses the legislature and the citizens of West Virginia and prepares and submits his budget for the state. Now, the Constitution requires that the governor balance the budget before he sends it to the House and to the Senate. But the trick is balance. What does balance the budget mean? And that's where we get in a lot of trouble and a lot of gray areas. So to help explain that, let me explain it in terms of, think of an ATM. Here you are, you just got your commission and you decide you're going to go to the ATM and buy something. Well, if you go to the ATM and buy something, before you take your commission and deposit it in the bank, you're going to change clothes and end up like this guy. But if you make your deposit before you use the ATM, then you're going to be happy and you're going to be able to buy whatever you want to buy. Now, that sounds like a simplistic approach, but really, that's what happens. When the governor submits his balanced budget is balanced if you pass all of the things, cut all the taxes, reduce all of the things he suggests, raise all the things he suggests, and so forth. If you don't do those things, then it's really not a balanced budget, even though it's balanced based on his revenue estimates and so forth, if that makes sense. So what happens is the budget is only balanced that the governor submits if you pass all of the suggestions and do all of the things the governor says in his budget proposal. If you don't, it's not a balanced budget, and again, there's no money in the ATM. So that's the difference between what the governor does and what the legislature does. The legislature, on the other hand, has to pass all of the legislation that will balance the budget, all of the tax cuts, all of the tax increases, all of the things that have to happen to make the budget balanced, because again, the Constitution of the state of West Virginia requires the budget be balanced. But the legislature just can't say, okay, the budget is passed and it's balanced. Before they can pass the budget, they have to pass all of this other stuff to make the budget balanced. So when do they have to do that, and why is the media screaming and saying, oh my God, they're so late and they haven't done it? I'm not sure, because sine die, which is Latin for without day, literally, means the last day of the legislative session. So the Constitution says that at the end of 60 days, at midnight, the legislature adjourns sine die, without day, which means they adjourn without scheduling a next time to meet, another day to meet, etc. But when that sine die hits and the gavel bangs, they're closed for business, gone fishing. But wait a minute, what if they don't have a budget? The Constitution's prepared for that as well. The Constitution says that on day 57, 3 days prior to sine die, if the legislature hasn't passed a budget and hasn't gone to the governor's desk, the governor must, not can, if, shall, would, the governor must extend the session for budget matters and revenue matters. So the bottom line is I've been doing this for a long time, and frankly, I can't remember a time when the legislature didn't extend into an extra 3 days or an extra week or how many ever days it takes to get the budget passed. So when we hear all the complaining about the legislature's doing this, when are we going to see a budget and so forth, we've never seen budgets this time, or we haven't seen final budgets. Budgets haven't been passed, so we're really not behind schedule or ahead of schedule. There is no schedule. The Constitution requires that if they don't pass it by the 57th day, the governor has to proclaim that they extend for 3 days. It's that simple. I don't remember a time when our budget got extended. So all this shade thrown about the budget in the legislature is kind of just, it's kind of just hot air, because I don't remember when the legislature hadn't passed a budget. It would be nice if we had a budget passed in the 60 days, but again, you have to remember it's not like the legislative position is different than the governor's position. The legislature has to pass all the bills and get the governor to sign all the bills that are going to balance the budget. The governor just has to propose. So the legislature's job is a lot tougher, and I don't like it, no matter whether you like them or your whatever your party preference is. I don't like it when they get a bad name, because I want to tell you something. Those guys, those folks work really, really hard, and they're doing their best, whether you like what they're doing or not, and we certainly have our own opinions, but don't just say they're not doing anything, because they really are, and they're really getting a bad rap for it, and I don't like it. So we've got 9 or so days to go. Let's figure out where we are exactly. As I told you, the governor's made his proposal. The legislature is looking at what they need to do to balance the budget. So let's take a look at the 3 proposals. The governor down here has proposed some tax increases, deferring a lot of payments, leverage and bonding, taking money here and using it to leverage over here by deferring payments here. It's a very complicated budget, frankly, and it's got lots and lots of tax increases in it. Along with that, unfortunately, he's going around calling the legislature names. He's changed the light bulbs in the top of the Capitol dome to red because he says the budget's in an emergency. And let me tell you something about this dome light up here. It's typically not red, it's white. When you drive by the Capitol anytime except now, and that light was lit, it meant that the state was officially in a declared state of emergency, like our floodings in June and so forth. This is just shenanigans, quite frankly, and I'm sorry if I make anybody mad when I say that. That's not helping matters, because the legislature's trying, the governor's trying. There's no need to poke fun. There's no need to call names. There's no need to do any of that other stuff. It's not helping. So anyway, the governor has proposed his budget. It's got a lot of tax increases and a lot of sophisticated financial maneuvering to get money here, to put money there, and so forth. The House's budget is very different. The House's budget, or the revenue, basically, enhancements, are based on sort of a flat tax, a reduction in the sales tax, that's what I said, a reduction in the sales tax, but an increase in the number of people that pay that tax. So in other words, they're trying to go to a flat tax where they'll tax all consumptions, but they're going to lower that tax because what they're trying to do is, for example, you've heard us talk about in House Bill 2933, they're going to remove the exemption from sales tax, for example, on professional services. So while they're lowering the sales tax, at the same time, they're expanding the number of people that are going to have to pay that tax, or the number of ways, I should say, rather, that tax is collected, because consumers are going to pay the tax regardless of how it's collected. So at the end of the day, that's sort of the House proposal in a nutshell. Now, there are a lot more intricacies in all of these proposals, but I'm just giving you the bottom lines. In the Senate has taken a different approach. They've decided that since we're in such bad shape, that maybe this is the time to look at some significant tax reform. Originally, they looked through their special task force or task committee on taxes, chaired by Senator Carnes up in the Upshur County area. They looked at a proposal that was brought forward about 20, 30 years ago of tax reform that wasn't implemented. They're looking at a lot of those aspects again. One of the things that they're looking at is they're looking at income tax reduction, consumption tax increases, and with those consumption tax increases, they believe that by increasing the sales taxes and consumption taxes, they don't have to remove the exemptions for professional services like real estate commissions, closing attorneys, and so forth, that the House version does. So there's a lot of discussion on whether consumption tax versus income tax and regressive tax versus progressive tax and so forth. But the bottom line is the theory of the elimination of income tax while increasing consumption tax is that you will save more money in not paying income tax than you will in paying the increased consumption tax. The other piece of that is that the argument that strong proponents and economists who believe in consumption taxes are that income tax, while along with taxing your income, also taxes idle money. In other words, the money that you have in savings, the money that you've invested for your retirement. Well, income tax taxes a lot of those things when that money is just sitting there for future purposes. Consumption taxes don't tax the money until you use it, until it's working, so to speak. So as long as my money is sitting in a savings account, I'm not paying a consumption tax on it. I'm only going to pay a consumption tax on that money in savings if I take it out to buy a house, to buy a boat, to do whatever. In those cases, once I pay for something, then they charge a consumption tax on that. So that's the difference between the consumption tax versus the income tax, is idle money tax versus working money tax. At least that's the economic theory. So as you can see, there's a lot of things going on in the legislature with what, only 9 days to go. So what we're going to talk about now is where we are with those 9 days. I already explained crossover day to you. The bill I told you about in the House, where they were doing their flat tax and all those kinds of things, is House Bill 2933. In the Senate, it's Senate Bill 409. And we've got about 9 days left in the legislative session. So here's what's going to happen and what's happened. As I told you yesterday, it was crossover day. 2933 did not make it out of the House. So in all essence, 2193, the bill is dead. It's not going anywhere because it didn't make it out of its House of origin. That doesn't mean that the language and the other stuff is in 2933 is dead. And here's what we think is going to happen. Senate Bill 409 passed the Senate and was reported to the House. So the House has received Senate Bill 409. It's still alive, and it's going to be alive for the next 9 days or however long this thing takes. So Senate Bill 409 is alive. It's in the House. It's been referred to the House Finance Committee. What we think will happen in House Finance is they'll do what's called a strike and insert. And what that means is that someone on the House Finance Committee will make a motion to strike everything after the enacting clause and insert in lieu thereof the language of House Bill 2933, which again, for our purposes, increases a lot of taxes in the home buying process. So we don't like that part of 2933. So they will do a strike and insert, take it to the floor of the House. The House will likely pass it with amendment, with non-amendment. We don't know. There were lots and lots of amendments that never made it to 2933 because they never made it for a vote. But anyway, we're going to assume that whatever it takes, it's going to pass the House and it will go back to the Senate, be reported to the Senate. The Senate will receive that in a message, and it will go something like this, where the clerk will say the House has passed Senate Bill 409 with amendments. Then the majority leader of the Senate will stand up and say, Mr. President, I move that we refuse to accept the House amendments and ask the House to recede therefrom. And in that case, it goes back to the House with that message from the Senate. The House will receive that message, and their majority leader will say, I move that we refuse to recede in the amendments and ask the Senate to appoint a conference committee to resolve the differences of the bill. So then that message goes back to the Senate with a list of the conferees that the House appointed. The House will then, the Senate will then appoint a conferees, and these 3 people on each side, or these 5 people on each side, depending on how many people that they decide to appoint, will then sit down, get together, hopefully resolve all of the differences in the bill, come up with one product that both sides agree to, take it to their respective bodies. Those bodies will then presumably pass the agreed upon bill, and it will go to the governor for his signature. It's all clear as mud now, right? Everybody understands. Remember how I started this thing? To retain the respect for sausages and laws, one must not watch them in making. I know it's a very confusing process. You ought to try to live it every day. Some other things that we have going on, Senate Bill 609, which looks like it increases the ability, at least, if not the actual property tax for schools to be able to recapture some of the money that they're going to have to cut out of the state budget. What we think that amounts to right now, we're still reviewing the bill, is about $30 per year per $100,000. That's just a rough ballpark estimate. And so on the average home sale in West Virginia is $175,000, so we're probably looking at a property tax increase annually of maybe $60, $70 a year if Senate Bill 609 gets through, but we're still looking at 609. So that's not good news or bad news, but it's where we are with everything right now. Currently, we're reviewing all of the bills that we were watching, see what's dead, what's alive. That's what you do today after crossover day. So I just wanted to give you an update because you haven't heard from me in a while. I appreciate all of the emails, all of the phone calls that went to legislators. I can promise you that they made a difference, and the legislature is aware of our concerns regarding these bills, and I'll keep you posted. Keep watching your email daily, please, because if we need to do another call to action, it's going to have to be fast because remember, we've only got 9 days left to go. That's all for now. As always, if you have any questions, any comments, please call us, email us, text us. We're here for you. We're your association. Thanks for listening. Come on, Bill. Let's get out of here.
Journey to the capital city. It's a long, long wait while I'm sitting in committee, but I know I'll be a law someday. At least I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill.